Around the United Kingdom coast, the shallow, nutrient-rich waters have given rise to some of the richest fishing grounds anywhere in the world.
I have been lucky enough over the years to see masses of fish caught. I can remember when we had boom time on sprat. They used to come in along the shore, right in, literally in, so they were washing up on the beach. Well, that suited us because we had small boats so we could get in there. You know, and we used to literally fill them up to the gunnels with fish till we couldn't get no more on the boats. The boats were virtually underwater.
I first started fishing in 1957 from Swanage. We used to work our pots 3 times a day, haul them 3 times a day. And sometimes the best tide of all was the evening tide. And by then we had 1,000 pound of lobsters. Unbelievable. People. That is absolutely true. But that's how the lobster fishing was then.
I can remember when my father started wreck netting, hundreds of stones of cod and pollock and all really big fish. But over the years I've seen that all decline away.
I say this today, I think we overdone it a bit. You could actually see the lobster catches, you know, did start to tail off. I'm sure to this day we weren't, you know, we overdone it.
It was a pretty depressing time, the late 90s and early noughties, because there were a lot of fish disasters around the place. There wasn't really much hope.
Before the scalloping was closed off here, it hit sort of rock bottom.
Lyme Bay, stretching from Dorset to Devon on the Jurassic coast, held great riches under the water, as the seabed contained one of England's hidden gems, a huge coral garden.
This was an area with the richest bottom fauna in the country. They had Ross corals and sea fans and sunset corals and all sorts of things that people didn't even associate with the British waters. Corals, for goodness sake. And all these wonderful hydroids and pink sea fans, which take forever to grow and are sort of elegant, delicate structures that rise off the seabed.
Because many of the local finfish species had been exploited, fishermen were forced to concentrate on prey lower down the food chain, like crustaceans and shellfish.
At the same time as this realization that this beautiful landscape existed below the waves was the realization that what they actually earned their money out of around here, or some people did, was going out and smashing them all up and catching scallops with big weighted dredges.
This is how the seabed was before the scallopers came about. This was all pristine. You had the dead man's fingers, you had the various corals and sea fans. And this is after dredging. You can see how desecrated that seabed is. Now, I can't honestly think that anybody with any common sense can't see what destruction was taking place in the sea.
I was trawling, I was dredging, and certainly not as heavily as a lot of the boats that were here doing it were. I mean, there was some very, very big boats. I was doing it, I was enjoying it actually, but it was an adrenaline rush. Earning a real nice blooming bit of money like with it as well. Always an adrenaline rush when you're earning a bit of money.
We had no problems with the local boats. The ones at Lyme were excellent. We worked together. It wasn't a problem. And then all of a sudden the price of scallops went X, Y, Z, whatever there was. And before we looked around, we had a multitude of under 12 metre boats that could come into this area, scalloping. And of course, it was creating absolute mayhem.
The two different types of fishing gear brought the mobile trawlers and dredgers into conflict with the static potters and netters.
We'd go out there to put our crab pots, and because some of them would be missing and things, and that created a tension.
We caught lobsters that were smashed in half. The claws were smacked up, the bodies were smacked up, unbelievable.
You go out to sea one day and a lot of your gear's missing, and it's cost you a lot of money. We're only small boats, scratching a living as such, especially when you knew more or less who it was, but you couldn't prove it, and they would just flatly deny it.
Although voluntary agreements had been made, some thought the scallopers had broken them.
Conservationists have called on the government to stop fishermen dredging for shellfish off the South Devon and Dorset coasts. They say the fishing is destroying delicate coral.
It was one of those things in this world, you have to sort of stand up and, be counted. I went to London and we went round to number 10 and we had it in this dossier, and within 3 months we suddenly found we've got a marine protected area on our hands.
The government permanently closed 60 square miles of seabed to trawling and dredging.
Jonathan Shaw signed the 2008 statutory instrument which closed the reefs in Lyme Bay, a larger area than any other part of the country, to have such a closure.
The fishermen affected in the 4 ports of West Bay, Lyme Regis, Axmouth and Beer were seething.
Yes,
What do you think about that?
it was a time of high drama on occasions. Really high drama.
The top-down decision came as a massive shock, especially to one of the oldest and biggest fishing families, the Wasons.
So what's going to happen to you after 40 years of fishing this bay?
The minister came to the table. He didn't give us any hope that there might be any monies or compensation. Nothing.
It felt like it was always felt, to be honest, that we weren't involved in it. Nothing. It was just something that happened, above and beyond us.
There are moments when fishermen will say, that was the moment that we all felt betrayed when they closed us. Even the fishermen who were fishing there, watching dredges go past within 10 feet of their pots.
It absolutely solved that problem. That we knew that we could put our pots or nets somewhere, and they would still be there. We knew that there was no boats coming in there in the night or whenever, and was going to start towing through our gear.
The closure to trawling and dredging created England's largest marine protected area, and under the water it wasn't long before miraculous things started to happen.
When we first went to Lyme Bay, I was a little confused why it had been protected in the first place, because massive areas looked like rubble. Some of it looked like a building site. And then we continued to monitor the site. The first 3 years, it was very slow to recover, and we were wondering whether anything was going to change. But after year 3, we really did start to see communities growing on the seabed, like just very small sponges and small corals, and they just started to grow. And this just started then to provide those building blocks that the other animals need. They provide important feeding areas and nursery areas.
But by not consulting with the fishermen or creating a management plan, the closure created an unforeseen problem.
After a couple of years, people were still saying, well, why isn't it getting a lot better? And why it wasn't getting a lot better was, of course, because the conflicts had been removed with the mobile gears. There were no more mobile gears coming in. It became a kind of magnet for pots and nets in any quantity anybody wanted to chuck at it. 50,000 tonnes is,
yeah, the quota
is a third more than the whole quota, than the 29,500, which is the total quota.
Charles Clover had been a journalist at the Daily Telegraph at the time the fishing grounds in Lyme were closed. He and some media colleagues went on to set up the Blue Marine Foundation in an attempt to stop the decline of the world's fisheries. Clover and the team at Blue wanted to know if a model of collaboration, first pioneered in California, might work in a heavily fished area like Lyme. California was one of the first places to try to bring fishermen, conservationists and regulators together to agree on what kind of protection might work.
Point Sur was one of the most important areas that we protected on the entire Central Coast because it's the largest persistent kelp forest. That's the beginning of the Marine Reserve, and the lee and the other side of Point Sur, as we turn the corner, the Marine Reserve is right underneath us.
This type of thing has to be created bottom up from the folks who will be affected need to have a say, a part in creating something like this. I don't think anybody involved in this process got everything they wanted, but everybody got something, and that was they got heard. Their voices were heard. They had an opportunity to participate in the process of designing these MPAs, and that's really essential.
The ocean has less pressure on it. It's rebuilding. I see it. I see more whales, more everything. There's more life out there now than there has been in 20. I came into a pod of like 100 blue whales last year.
Did you?
100.
But could Clover and Blue Marine bring the Californian approach to the UK and improve on it?
In 2011, Tim Glover and I went down to West Bay for a meeting to discuss whether fishermen and conservationists could work together. And the first meeting was pretty sticky, and we nearly got chucked in the dock.
I mean, the first thing Charles asked us was whether it was a starter at all, like for having closed areas. And yeah, he nearly lost a few teeth.
The idea of closing areas to fishing elicits a visceral response from fishermen.
I'm the last of the great hunters, all right? Remember that. We are the last people that have to go out there and hunt what we catch. Go out there and try doing it in a gale of wind, and then tell me that when I get in, actually, someone's going to take that bit away from you.
Some fishermen affected by the original ban did not trust the Blue Marine Foundation at first.
There are people within the four ports who are not prepared to be involved.
We're very sceptical, don't get me wrong.
Like what?
Well, it's a conservation group for starters. So you're going to think, well, hang on a minute, what's your angle here? Why are you wanting to be pally with us?
Faced with failure, Clover and colleague Tim Glover swiftly adapted their approach.
I just took a decision that we would just do the conservationist ideas that the fishermen came up with themselves. So we would simply do what they said would achieve conservation objectives.
They sat around a table and they said, what do you as fishermen need? And we said, in what way do you mean? They said, well, any way. Just tell us something you need that would help you. That was the first time that we'd ever been asked that.
I very quickly realised that talking to people was the only real way that we were actually going to be able to move forward.
2 years into the project, the Blue Marine Foundation team got together before a now regular meeting with all the fishermen.
This will be a crucial meeting to unify them.
We've got 3 ports and one split port, and that's what we've got to deal with tonight.
They've had a lot of bad things happen to them in the past. They've been chucked out of areas, their livelihood's gone down, and it takes a long time to break that kind of mould and persuade them that what we're trying to do is to help them manage their fishery in a more sustainable way.
The next step was to assure the fishermen that trying to be sustainable wouldn't destroy their business.
We need to get that clearly defined, what the parameters are around sustainability.
We have no credibility unless we can put a finger on what is sustainable and what isn't.
That's fine, I just didn't get an understanding from that.
Traceable and sustainable.
Yeah.
We're testing that over 3.5 years. The project as it goes on, we'll be able to refine that much more clearly in terms of what level of potting is actually going to be sustainable. If we are actually going to look to manage a fishery, we need to know that is it completely benign, or is there some point where you have too much potting? So the study was set up to experimentally determine what the impact of different levels of potting was on the environment.
So the scientists and fishermen worked together in one of the first studies of its kind to measure the impact of the fishing activity.
Each one of the 4 ports had 4 500-metre square experimental areas, and the fishermen chose those areas, they marked them, and they potted them. So the fishermen did this project.
A very worthwhile project. Every time I went to sea with Adam, I learnt something that I hadn't realised before.
With the science underway, improvements were created that would help make up for any lost income.
Well, if you're going to catch less fish, you need to sell it for more. There's no point in having sustainable fish if you don't sell it at the highest quality, because number one criteria on any fish auction market is quality, which means that it is fresh, super fresh. Nobody's going to worry about traceability or sustainability, any of those things, if it ain't fresh.
Oh, it's got a lovely action.
Chiller units and ice machines were installed in all 4 ports. And Axmouth got a lobster tank.
It's going to enable us to demand a higher price because we won't be forced to sell on a particular day. We will be, in fact, be able to say no to a price and wait.
This puts you back into control.
Yes, very much going to put us back in control of what we're actually marketing.
They've done the conservation and are continuing to do the conservation, and we're very happy to help them with a payback, which helps them to get their product to market and get better prices for it.
Then a retail mechanism was created to increase the value of the fish that was being caught.
The fish is being sold under the brand name Reserve Seafood, reflecting that it's come from the Lyme Bay Fishery and Conservation Reserve.
Because it's caught in a sustainable way in a conservation area, that's a massive selling point.
People want to know where their fish has come from, is managed, it's sustainable. The term sustainability carries throughout to the plate, which is brilliant because you tend to get a little bit more money for your catch.
A new project coordinator was employed to look after the fishermen day to day.
Yeah, I know.
Probably will end up doing it.
I love Reserve Seafood. Reserve Seafood for me is everything that everybody wants. It's there for the consumer. It gives them better quality fish. It's more money for the fishermen, and that the end consumer will get fresher fish and pay less for the fish, yet the fishermen will gain more. For us, that's massive.
So we've got obviously what we sell as a shop, and to include or incorporate the Lyme Bay fish.
Ah, fantastic.
You opening up a processing center here, having all the fish running through it. So for a town that really doesn't generate a lot in the winter months, that could change it, couldn't it?
The future within the reserve is, to put it bluntly, a gold mine.
After 5 or 6 years, the underwater life of Lyme Bay was beginning to see real change.
Within 5 years, the bed really erupted and we had large sponges and corals of all sorts of shapes and sizes. By excluding the most destructive fishing gear, within 4 years of protection, the overall abundance and diversity of species more than doubled. It's almost unbelievable, I think. That's really impressive.
We're seeing, a takeoff in the amount of scallops, a takeoff in the amount of rays, a takeoff in the amount of lobsters and sometimes crab. All of these things, these species are variable. But we have seen the massive rise that comes from the recovery of an ecosystem. I don't think we've seen that anywhere else around UK.
But would the closure and the management plan mean bigger catches?
I think there's more fish on the ground, as in wet fish. We've seen a real decline in crab catches, but lobsters have really increased. Overall, I think there's more fish on the ground, yeah. Exactly the fish we want.
Then 4 years after it had started, the results came back from the potting study.
The upshot of the study is that it proves the level of potting that's currently being undertaken in Lyme Bay by the local fishermen is entirely sustainable.
We now know that there are certain types of fishing that is compatible with conservation gains. It's an exemplary study that is going to be very important in terms of how we roll this out through national and international policies.
The Lyme Bay case study is the UK's best example of this kind of data. And now we know how to go forward and we know how to go and manage all these new marine protected areas.
Well, we've tested a lot of things that could be applied around the British coast.
You could take the Lyme Bay experience, if you like, to other areas. The general principles, talking to the fishermen to start with, trying to put things right from the bottom up rather than the top down.
Soon, other fishing communities, even from around Europe, became interested in Lyme's successful model.
Today, fishermen from across the Mediterranean are hearing about an 84% increase in species diversity here.
Welcome to Axmouth Harbour. We're 4 or 5 years down the road from where they are, maybe, so hopefully they might get some pointers.
He comes up here 3 times a week, he sends us a text on our phone, and he asks us whether we've got any fish to take down to Plymouth.
There is certainly some good things that we've done here that are transportable.
Over the last 10 years, Lyme Bay has improved dramatically, but in many other ports across the country, things have been getting steadily worse.
Here in Jersey, a lot of the young guys or the small-scale fishermen really do care about what is going on. We want to make sure that things are managed properly. We want to make sure that there's enough stock for the future, and especially so that our industry can carry on thriving. If it carries on the way it keeps going, there's not going to be much of a future for it. In the last 2 years, a lot of boats have sold up. Seeing what's happened at Lyme Bay and around other areas around the UK, I really think that something like that will really work here in Jersey.
Eyemouth in Scotland was experiencing the same problems as Lyme.
Too many lobster pots, far too many lobster pots. You know, there's some boats working, 2,000, 2,500, something like that. There is a lot of gear on the seabed, so it's going to take its toll on stocks, which it will, and that's inside the marine reserve, outside, it's everywhere now. What am I worried about? Well, it's getting that way that if something's not done now, then forget it, in 5 years it's going to get really, really, really hard and people are going to go out of business.
The inshore waters that have the most pressure upon them, where all that expectation is, then we have to manage them very carefully indeed.
Right now, the UK has a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to successfully manage our own waters. Can we use the lessons of Lyme Bay, where a model of collaboration between fishermen, conservationists and scientists working together to create a sustainable fishery that adds value to local businesses, but also protects the marine environment?
We've done some extraordinary things. I mean, some really groundbreaking and extraordinary things have been done.
Blue I can't knock at all. They've only done good for us, and I don't see no reason why it's going to change. They've done everything that we've asked and they've done everything they've said. So,
what would you say to other ports and harbours who are thinking of it, who are as sceptical as you were at the beginning? What would your message be to them?
If Blue had approached anyone else now, they'd be fools not to speak to them. Absolute fools.
Having the reserve in position has done no harm.
So you've
all good.
You've come a long way then.
I can remember my grandfather saying that after the Second World War, that if you fell overboard, you got more chance of being eaten than drowning because there was that much fish in the sea. But obviously it had been left alone for the period of the war. Nobody had been fishing as such.
Specific areas where certain types of fishing are not allowed, without a shadow of a doubt, they work. Not just for the ecosystem under the waves, but for that endangered species which is the British fisherman. It also works for them.